Thank you again for joining the webinar, What is Google Analytics for and how to prepare for it. Today we have joining us Michael Curran, RBFF's Program Manager with Blast, and Taylor Cruz will be presenting. She is Blast's Analytics Strategist, focusing on digital analytics structure and reporting. Taylor has been in the digital analytics industry for 6 years and has previously worked on website analytics with the state of Connecticut. Without further ado, I'll turn it over to Taylor.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Hello, everybody. So, as mentioned, my name is Taylor Cruz. I work with Blast Analytics, and today we're going to talk to you guys about GA4. So today we are going to go over kind of an overview of GA4, what is GA4, and kind of how did GA4 come to be. We'll talk a little bit about some new features in GA4 that you can't get in GA Universal. And then we'll also talk about backing up GA Universal data with the impending GA Universal shutdown. And then we'll talk about a little bit about removal of third-party cookies and how that may or may not impact your current analytics setup. And then last, we'll go over how you can use data effectively in general, kind of tool agnostic. It doesn't have to be in GA4. We'll talk about a few things that GA4 has that you can use, but that portion is more just in general, how you can use data and make sure you use it effectively. GA4 overview. So we'll do a quick history lesson here. So Google Analytics started out in 2005 as they acquired Urchin. And Urchin was a very basic but innovative way to see website usage statistics. And then in 2007, Google announced that they will change the name from Urchin to Google Analytics Classic. And this kind of was a new data tracking platform, but still kind of had some limited abilities in the tracking capabilities that it had. In 2013, Google Analytics Classic got kind of an upgrade to GA Universal. And it was a refresh on the way data was viewed and how it was brought a cleaner picture to businesses on what the users are doing on their websites. Now, separately, in 2015, Google acquired a company called Firebase, and this gave organizations the ability to track application data into a Google Analytics property. Then over time, as Google saw the markets change, companies needing the ability to see how users move between websites and applications, in 2019, Google introduced App plus Web, which really brought the ability to see both application data and Google Analytics data, website data into the same GA property. Now in 2020, Google changed the name from App plus Web to GA4. And this kind of started that next evolution of cross-platform user journey tracking. And this brings us to today, where GA4 is not designed solely for websites or solely for applications. It is designed so that you can technically be able to see people move through your different platforms should you have both website and applications. Now, that's not to say you can't use it for just websites or just applications. It just now allows for the capability to see both in one single user journey. So Google Analytics and GA4 are universal and GA4 are different. So here we kind of have an outline of the account structure differences. In GA Universal, where you guys are probably most familiar, you have an account and then you have a property, and then within that property you can set up reporting views that are filtered and tailored to specific settings where you can exclude certain things or only include certain information, and you can have multiple views per property. So with this setup, the data collection happens at the property level and the reporting happens at the view level. In GA4, there is no views. There are no views. So in GA4, you have your account still and you have your property. However, now the data collection and the reporting both happen at the property level. So you don't have that third level view where you can have multiple views. Everything is done in the property. You can view your reports. You can tailor the reports. You can do some high level filtering from the initial on-go and then additional filtering within the reporting interface. If you do happen to pay for Google Analytics, they do have the option of doing a sub-property, and a sub-property function similar to views. However, they do have potentially an added cost depending on how much traffic you're sending to your sub properties. And again, that is only available in the paid 360 version of Google Analytics. So next, the other big difference here and big change is the event structure. So in Google Analytics Universal, again, you guys are probably familiar with event category, action, and label. This allows you to say, I want these actions to go as the category and action, and this is information I want to be poured into the event label. Then you have this other element of custom dimensions that you can apply after the fact to these event reports and see additional information. You also can apply custom dimensions to page reports and other acquisition reports and other reports in Google Analytics Universal. In GA4, there is no event category, there is no event action, there is no event label. What you have is an event name and parameters or custom dimensions. And so the event name is really meant to take event category and action and put them together. So think of page view or button click, link click, those types of actions. It's really meant to be more action focused. So we like to tell people, think of event names, the actions you want to track on your website. Now parameters are similar to event label and custom dimensions. These are the details about those actions that you want to know. So for instance, if it was a CTA click or navigation click was your event name, maybe the navigation item or the CTA name would be the items that the parameters that you would want to know, so that you know what they're clicking on the navigation. And with these, you do have a couple of limitations. So you do have you can only have up to 25 parameters per event. If you are on the paid version, you can have up to 100 per event. And then you can have 50 in total based on the scopes. So you can have 50 user scope parameters and 50 event scope parameters into the same property. Now, the last thing I wanted to kind of mention with this is you do kind of lose a little bit of that hierarchy that you might have with event category action label. However, the benefits of doing it this way is now you're able to plug and play with the data the way that you want. You can see it as aggregated as you want and as detailed as you want. So you can say, I want to see, regardless of the parameters coming in, how many times did people click on the navigation? Then you can drill down and say, okay, I want to see all the times people clicked on the navigation, but only the ones that they clicked on this specific navigation item. And you can do that, and then you can pair that with other parameters that you may have. And so it really allows you to go as granular and detailed as you want, or as high level as you want. And you can kind of plug and play with it a little bit more. So it opens the flexibility a lot more than you did have in GA Universal. It also allows you to be more tailored in your naming conventions. So instead of having these generic event category, action, and label, where you might um, have so much that kind of goes into event label. There's so many different things depending on the event category it's related to, or so on. You kind of have to have an intimate knowledge of how things were set up to really know what event label means in all these different cases. Whereas with GA4, you can have these specific naming conventions that make it very easy to people to know what it is. Navigation click. Okay, I know what that is. Um, versus event category is tons of different uh, names and tons of different actions and all these things. You can have parameters instead of it being just event action or event label. You can say navigation item that they clicked and the values that go associated with that. So it just allows you to be a lot more concrete and detailed about your naming conventions, which will make it easier as you bring on new people who might look at the data. They don't have to take as long to understand it. So all of this kind of means that essentially GA4, it's not just a version upgrade. It's technically a true platform switch. We get a lot of clients under the misrepresentation that since they're both Google, that it's kind of like iOS. When Apple comes out with a new iOS, you click a button, let it do its thing, and it's great. That's unfortunately not the way that GA4 works. GA4 really is a platform switch. And so with that, it does mean you have to sort of rethink about uh, how you're doing your events, your naming conventions. Um, with any platform switch, you're also going to have metric calculations are going to change a bit. So an example is sessions are calculated a little differently in GA Universal versus GA4. Bounce rate is calculated differently between the two. And so there's a couple of different metric changes. Administration options will be different. In GA Universal, you're used to a lot of different filters from the onset. In GA4, you can only do IP filters from the onset. The rest you have to do within the reporting interface. The underlying data model is a bit different. There are old ways of doing things, like the way that you might have your code set up might not be um, might not gel well with GA4. You might have to make some code updates to get GA4 in the best possible place. Um, but with all of that, it also means that new possibilities emerge. There are new things and features in GA4 that you can't do in GA Universal that actually will help you in the long run. And after this presentation, we will have a different slide deck that's going to be uploaded and shared with you. That's going to go over more information about all the different differences and limitations and just more about GA4 that we can't cover in this particular webinar here. So you'll have access to that slide deck after the webinar. So next we're going to go over some new features in GA4. So GA4, as I've talked about before, it's really about cross-platform tracking. So if you only have a website, that's completely fine. You can track all the website needs totally fine, no problem. Same if you only have an application. However, if you have both a website and an app, then GA4 really now allows you to see them both together. Previously you had to go and see your application data in Firebase and its own GA property, and then you see your website in its own GA property. Now you can see them both together in the same property and be able to see how people flow between the platforms. And this really allows you to see and answer business questions. For example, finding the total unique users regardless of platform. So it kind of allows you to deduplicate those users and know that these users are the same instead of counting them two different users since you're looking at two different properties. It also allows you to see how many total conversions happened across all platforms. also which platform is performing better with specific conversions. So if you have the same conversion functionality or same types of functionality in both the website and the app, you can see which one is performing better with your users and allows you to be able to tailor maybe some minor differences or minor updates to the one that's not performing well, focus your marketing efforts and all of that on the one that is performing better. So as I mentioned before too, you have some new metrics and they're calculated a little differently, but that can also mean a good thing. And so for instance, bounce rate and engagement rate. Bounce rate in GA Universal, it does come with a caveat. And I've always told people you have to take bounce rate with a grain of salt. And perfect examples could be when there are times where bounces are seen as negative, but in reality, it was a positive thing for the end user. So an example is a user views a page, say a stalking status page, and they want to see, they bookmarked it, they went straight to it, and all they want to see is the fish stock replenished or not? How are things going? Right? So they go to that page, they read it, they get their update, they right? In GA Universal, it's seen as negative. It's a bounce. They're saying people did not engage with your, but in reality, it's positive. User intent was successfully completed. The end user was happy, and they moved on with their day. And that is a really good thing. But in GA Universal, it's shown as a bad thing. So what Google did is they created this new thing called engagement rate. And this new metric really solves for that issue. So engagement rate is basically allows you to say, okay, this is the number of sessions that were actually engaged sessions, regardless if they, went and then left right away. So engaged sessions are essentially sessions that are lasted more than 10 seconds or longer. It can be adjusted up to 60 seconds at 10-second increments. So we usually have people bump it all the way up to 60, but you can do it at 30 seconds, whichever sort of time frame that you feel is best to say this person was actively engaged. They can either stay on as long as you have it adjusted, have one or more conversion events happen, or view two or more pages. So what this does is this solves for that issue where if a user goes to a page where all they're looking for is getting the information and leaving, as long as they stayed on that and read the page for more than 30 seconds or 10 seconds, whichever way you have it set, then when they leave, it is technically considered an engaged session and it reflects truly of that positive experience the user had. Whereas in GA Universal, it's automatically seen as negative. In GA4, now it can reflect the reality of it actually being positive. Another new feature that GA4 has is this thing called time elapsed on their funnels. So they have the ability to create these funnel reports. So you can create funnel reports based off various steps that you have in an application, in a purchase funnel, in a form, whichever sort of funnel steps you want. If it could be viewing multiple pages to get to a certain page, or however you define your funnel. It allows you to tailor the reports to whichever funnel types that you need. And then what it allows you to do is there's this little toggle that says time elapsed. And what it allows you to do is see the amount of time it took from people to go from one step to the next. And so in GA Universal, there are a few funnels that you can see, but really all they provide is did they move to the next step or did they drop off? That's it. So you're saying, okay, this has a high drop off rate. Okay, let's figure that out. But what GA Universal doesn't take into account is how long people are going from step one to step two, or from step two to step three. They may not be dropping off, but they may be taking way too long to get from the different steps. And so with the time elapsed, now allows you to see, even if they didn't drop off, are they taking too long? Is this form too complicated? And it really allows you to get more granular in how you can possibly upgrade your forms or your applications or make changes to just make the experience better for the user. You can also pair that with device category or city or other dimensions to see if it's taking too long on a mobile app or a mobile phone versus a desktop. Maybe there's a glitch in the mobile version and everything is fine in the desktop version. So you can see the differences between the two. Um, to really get into exactly, are there issues, are there not issues? If there are, what is it? So next, we're going to talk a bit about backing up your GA Universal data. So GA Universal shutdown. It's a big thing that came out recently. Google announced that GA Universal will eventually stop processing data. The day that it will stop processing data will be July 1st, 2023 for unpaid accounts. Anybody who's paying Google for that 360 experience, theirs gets extended for a year, and their GA Universal will shut down on July 1st, 2024. Originally, the paid versions was going to be shut down in October of 2023, and they moved it out to 2024. There's no guarantee that they won't push it out more again, uh, but you kind of have to go with what they're saying right now. And so that means is you have to prepare to make sure that you move and are comfortable on GA4 before that shutdown. And ideally, we like to tell people to make sure that you are up in GA4, up and running, and have at least a comfortability level with it. Ideally, it was a year from the shutdown. Obviously, that's past now. And so, really, that crucial time I would say is at least 6 months. You really want to make sure that you have GA4 up and running probably by the end of February or March, ideally. That way, it gives you some data in there and it gets you comfortable before that shutdown. Because what's the problem is there's no backfill of data. You're not going to get any of your GA Universal data in GA4. And so once the shutdown happens, Google has noted that users will have access to their data for at least 6 months post shutdown. However, they've also alluded that at some point that access will go away. And some people might be, well, why are they saying I'm not going to have access to my data after 6 months or 7 months or whatever it may actually be? And it's most likely due to storage availability and the liability of old data that's no longer supported. So while they're saying, yes, you're going to have access to your data after the shutdown, there is going to be a point in time where your GA Universal data that you have stored right now will be gone and you will not be able to access it. So in preparation for that, it is important to back up your most crucial needed data. And so we wanted to give you some things that you might want to consider when you're going to back up your data. So how long do you realistically need to capture? So generally we recommend 1 year of data. I max 2 years. You really don't want to go beyond 2 years. And honestly, you probably don't want to go beyond 1 to 1.5 years. Because beyond that, um, there's going to be too many things that have changed, both internally and externally. Site functionality, layouts, political changes, or industry changes that may have changed the way people went on your site and what they did on your site. There's too many changes that have happened so long ago between now and then that it might mean there's too many factors to account in terms of uh, all the different elements in your data that you have to factor in. And it may lead to misinterpretation of the data or data that's just no longer able to data because of all these changes. So we don't want to go too far back in your data backup, but you do want at least a year to make sure that you have maybe some sort of year-over-year comparison if you did want to do some sort of comparison from what you did last year to this year. Some other things that you want to consider is where you plan on storing that data and how much room do you have to store the data. So the data can come in a couple of different forms, which we'll talk about in a few slides. Um, but do you guys have certain servers that you're going to store the data on? Are you just going to throw a flash drive in there and store it on that? Just sort of how much data do you want to back up, and do you have the capacity to store that data in a reliable way? And the other thing that kind of goes along with it is privacy changes or security concerns. And so, what I just mentioned is storing the data in a reliable way. If you're storing anything that, Google Analytics doesn't really capture PII, um, personally identifiable information, for those that may not know what that acronym is. However, you don't know for sure. And so you have to talk to your legal team and your uh, team that you have to make sure that wherever you're storing the data, however you're storing the data, it meets those security protocols and the needs for privacy. So when you're thinking about what reports and data you want to back up, there's really no sort of standard way. It's not necessarily like, hey, here's all the things that you should back up. It's really tailored to your specific needs, and you don't want to back up things that are never going to be used or just taking up that storage space or security risk or anything like that. So it's really important to truly think about what is important to you, what is important to your organization to think about. So think about standard reports and metrics such as users and page views. Those are always good to back up so that you have a general idea of your users. A lot of times, like, where they came from, your acquisition source. Did they come from referrals or Google search or from paid advertising that you're doing? So things like that are kind of good sort of baseline reports and metrics to back up. Um, but some other things you might want to consider if you guys do e-commerce, then the e-commerce reports are obviously going to be crucial. If you don't do e-commerce, then you shouldn't have to worry about those reports. Do you guys create any custom reporting in GA Universal? If so, you might want to think about those that you want to back up and store. And the last thing that you also want to think about is, you know, thinking about the breakdowns or, segments that you might want to understand. Um, you know, do you need to know if it's just new versus returning users and did they come from each different device 6 months ago? Or would just knowing new users versus returning users be completely fine? Or do you really need that breakdown of new versus returning users broken down by device type? Those are some things that you want to consider when you're backing up your data. You can't necessarily get that pairing um, after the fact. So best if you really want that type of pairing to do it in GA Universal right now and then back it up, export it so that you can back that data up. But again, if you don't need to know that information, that breakdown, then maybe just the top level metrics of new versus returning users or mobile versus desktop users is sufficient. So it's just something to think about as you're thinking about what reports to back up. And then the last thing I want to mention is also just making sure it's unsampled data. Um, and so start by having manageable timeframes. And so especially with people who are not on the paid version of GA Universal, you will have a lot of sampling potentially, depending on how much traffic is coming into your reports. And so if you say you want to go 1 year, um, you can do the full time frame in one go. However, if you see a little yellow badge on the top left, that means that your report is sampled. And when you kind of click into that, it'll tell you what percentage of sessions is counted. Sometimes only 26% of sessions is counted in that report, because there's just so much. And the reason sampling happens is it's able so that it allows you to see the reports faster. Um, the more they're processing the data to show you, the longer it's going to take to show you that data. Kind of think of it in terms of page load speeds, right? As an end user, you want the page to load fast. And as an end user of a report, you want the report to load fast. So in order to provide that, Google does what's called sampling. And so if you're seeing that your reports are being sampled, ideally, what you would want to do is just shorten the time frame and till it gets to a green check mark, and that means your report is unsampled, which means you're getting all of the data. And so instead of doing 12 months in one go, you might have to do 4 months at a time and do 3 exports or something like that, just to make sure that you're getting all of your data and not just a certain percentage of your data because of sampling. Also, so when you're thinking about your what reports you're wanting to back up, there's a couple different format options that you can choose. So for tables and sort of raw data, you can ideally choose a CSV file or an Excel file. You can also upload to Google Sheets and store in a cloud approach, or you can just download a CSV or an Excel file and throw it on a flash drive or throw it in an external drive or on your desktop. So you have those two options there. Those are great for tables and sort of raw data. Um, if you have visualizations, um, especially when you don't want to recreate the visuals like funnels or specific graphs and dashboards that you might have in GA4 or GA Universal, um, the best way to do is to do both an Excel or CSV to get the raw table data, but also do an download via a PDF. And downloading via PDF will be the only way you're going to be able to see that visualization. If you just download an Excel file or a CSV file or export it to Google Sheets, you'll get the data, but you won't get the graph along with it. If you download it as a PDF, then you do get the actual visualization of that graph. So Blast recommends doing a CSV and Excel file to make sure that you get all of the table data, and then also doing a PDF to make sure that you get sort of the image of the graph or table that you're seeing. And then that way it just gives you the flexibility to see the format that you need and to make sure that you're seeing those visuals and give you a sort of visual representation of your data. So this kind of brings me to the next point of, removal of third-party cookies. So a lot of talk has gone on about the removal of third-party cookies. What does that mean? What does it mean for different businesses? Should people freak out, or are they okay? So first, we'll kind of talk about what is a first-party cookie versus a third-party cookies. So cookies are small text files used by browsers to save information that's related to users. First-party cookies are set and used by the host domain, and not set by any other domain. So for example, first-party cookies on portal.ct.gov is they only share data with portal.ct.gov. They don't share data with other sites, and other sites don't share data with them. Third-party cookies basically report to other websites than the one that the user is on. So usually it's done by advertisers and marketing teams. So what it basically allows a marketer to do is say, okay, I want to be able to advertise on other sites. Let's throw a third party cookie in here. And then that way our website can talk to other websites and other websites can talk to our website, and we can now advertise on their websites. They can advertise on ours, and we can share information and be able to get users the get users to see the ads when we want them to see them, where we want them to see them. And so it's really used heavily in marketing. Now, the death of third-party cookies essentially, it's, third-party cookies are already limited by many browsers. Google Chrome will be stopping it using third-party cookies by the end of 2024, which is technically considered, the death of third-party cookies. And the reason why third-party cookies are going away is because it's cross website and it's all this user information sharing. um, it has been seen as a violation of people's privacy. You know, when I'm on a certain website, I don't want other websites to know what I'm doing. I don't need other people and other organizations to know what I'm doing on, X website. And so that's kind of the mindset in why third-party cookies are going away. Now, Google Analytics and GA4, Universal and GA4, only use first-party cookies. So they do not use third-party cookies. And Google Analytics data will not be impacted by the loss of third-party cookies. Third-party cookies are more used frequently for marketing efforts and display and paid search. So it's really more about your paid marketing efforts rather than your specific website analytics data. So what does this mean for your tracking? So Google Analytics tracking, as far as website tracking, seeing what people are searching on your website, what buttons they're clicking, forms they're submitting, all of that is not going to be impacted. What is going to be impacted is your digital marketing efforts. And so what you're going to want to do with your digital marketing efforts is just, it may not be as effective in the future as they've been historically because they're not talking to these other websites and other websites aren't talking to you. However, it will also mean that you just have to think more about your marketing efforts and your digital marketing strategy. So what you should continue using and deploying Google Analytics and GA4 as usual. You don't have to change anything that you're doing in Google Analytics. But really what you should be doing is reviewing your digital marketing efforts and making sure they're set up for future success. So, building the strong foundation of what's called zero party data, which is data that users knowingly provide and actively give you, such as, responses to quizzes or surveys, or signing up for a account or registering. And then first party cookies, which is Google Analytics, essentially data relating to what they're doing on your site, purchase history, buttons that they're clicking, things that they're searching, data that could be potentially tied to their logged in perspective if they do have a logged in perspective. So all of that data, build that up so that you can utilize that. And then launching personalized digital marketing campaigns driven by that data versus driven by data that is coming from third-party cookies and other websites talking to you. And so third-party cookies usually are injected, and so as long as you're kind of just looking at your digital marketing efforts, making sure you have strong UTMs, strong foundation of data that you can amplify your digital marketing campaigns based off of data that you already have versus relying on third-party cookies, then you should be completely good to go. So this kind of brings us to our last topic here, and it's basically about how you can use data effectively. So this is going to be sort of GA4 agnostic. It's not necessarily all related to GA4. It could be any tool. It could be GA Universal that you're using now. Could be GA4. It's just so that we can talk a little bit more about how you can use your data effectively. And so we'll go over 3 different scenarios that kind of give you an idea of different ways that you can use the data that you have. So one option is looking at the data and using it to bubble up content. So data can really help organizations understand what users are looking for and what they're doing, what they actually want to find. And when you take that data and you combine it, you know, you can look at the different separate parts, or if you combine them together, you can create a bigger picture at see what they're actually doing and what their experience is. And then you can use that to adjust your content and your layout to bring that information to the user at a much quicker pace and a smoother experience. So we'll kind of go through an example. So say you have a website that's referring people to your site. They have a link on their site. It's about free fishing days. They refer people. People click on that site. They go to your site. However, even though the content is related to free fishing days, that link takes them to your homepage. Then they're on your homepage. They're like, okay, now I need to find the information that I was looking for. Maybe they don't know what they're looking. They can't find the free fishing days information from your homepage. So they kind of browse around. They don't really see it. They search for it. Okay, great. It comes up. They found it. You know, based on that, their you know average time on page is only 15 seconds. They're not really finding the page that they want, but they're on the site for a really long time because again, they're not finding what they want. So they're seeing a lot of pages with a short amount of time. However, so you take that information, you're like, okay, well, I'm seeing all this data. Let's make this better for the user. Let's bring the free fishing days page on the homepage. Let's have a little call out or a link on the homepage. So now what happens when people click on that link from the referring website, they go to the homepage, they see that CTA button, and they go directly to the page that they want. This means that they may be on the site a little less time, but their engagement with the pages is longer and they view maybe less pages, but it's because they're getting to the point. They're getting where they want to go in a better way, a smoother, quicker way, and that allows for a more positive experience. So the next use case is basically streamlined applications and form submissions. So when a website has an online form application, it's important to make sure that it's as painless for the user to complete as possible. And this can include removing obstacles, auto-filling fields, um, making sure that they have all the information that they need up front in order to complete the form. And data can be used to help find those areas that are not working well and bringing to light opportunities to increase submissions. So we'll go through another use case here. So we have a form and we have a little intro page, and then we look at the funnel that's happening. So they have the start page, then they go through a few steps, and then they need to upload some documents right before they review and complete it. So what we're seeing here is a lot of people get to the upload and they're either bouncing a lot and they're just dropping off, or when you look at the time elapsed that GA4 may now has, we're seeing that going from upload to review, people are spending an hour between those. So they're either dropping off or they're just taking a really long time. They're like, okay, what's going on? So you look at it, you start looking at the page, you start looking at the application, bing, you find out that your start page only had 3 of the 5 needed documents on it. Okay, great. Let's update the content on that page. So we updated the content. Now it shows all 5 things that you need. So now once they get to the upload documents, they have all the needed information. They already knew they needed those 5 things. Whereas before they thought they only needed 3 of the 5 things. And so now we're seeing a lot less time to go from upload to review, and a lot less people finally completing and submitting the form. Now we'll go into one more sort of topic of being able to use data. So personalization. Personalization is becoming way more common. From Amazon showing things you would want to buy based off of previous purchases, or streaming services recommending shows you want to watch based off of your previous watch history. Having a good database that allows you to integrate with other platforms and services that offer personalization capabilities will help you tremendously and really bring to light sort of this new evolution of data and user experience. And so we'll go through another sort of use case here. Somebody is coming to your site and they're coming through a mobile app or a mobile phone, and they're viewing fishing events. They're looking at saltwater fishing pages, and you're seeing this pretty common. A lot of mobile users coming to the site looking at these things. So now, if you join this with some sort of personalization tool, which there are a bunch of different third-party personalization tools that don't use third-party cookies, that still use first-party cookies, but just allow you to take your own data and amp it up and show personalization based off of your data. This sometimes is also integrated into CMS systems, such as the CMS system Sitecore allows you to do personalization based off of information that the system gets within your website. So you can take that and now you can personalize the experience. So say your homepage or one of your pages has 3 call out boxes on it. Now you can say, for each of these 3 call out boxes, instead of showing the exact same thing to every user, people who come in through this experience, now they're going to get tailored CTA boxes where one might be advertising a mobile app. Hey, you're on a mobile phone. Do you know about our mobile app? Another CTA might be calling out getting a fishing license. Hey, I see you're interested in saltwater fishing. Do you have a saltwater fishing license? And your third call out might be linking to saltwater fishing tips and be like, hey, I see you're interested in saltwater fishing and fishing events. Here's some tips that you can do. So this just allows you to take the data that you're seeing and amp it up. And if you have a logged in experience, you can even do it further with that logged in experience. Hey, I saw that you got a fishing license last year. Hey, your fishing license is almost up for renewal. Come get renew your fishing license, buy another fishing license, register your boat again. So it can just tailor that experience, and that really brings a new level and sort of a next evolution of potentially government, allowing people interacting with government to be able to do these things on the site, much quicker and much more tailored experience for them. So all in all, as a kind of summary here, uh, prepare for GA4, get GA4 in place, back up the needed data before the GA universal shutdown, and get familiar with GA4 platform so that when that shutdown happens, you're off, you're ready, and you're comfortable. Third-party cookies, be aware of the removal of third-party cookies, but don't be afraid of losing your data. And last, use the data to your advantage. Don't let your data go unused. Don't just track a bunch of everything and then never use it, just kind of have it go stale. Don't do that. Use your data, connect the dots, and create better experiences for users based on that data. Use the data to your advantage. Thank you all. I appreciate you all listening in. If you have any further questions that we don't get to in the next couple minutes here, I do have my email here. You feel free to reach out if you need as well.
Great, thank you so much, Taylor. That was fantastic information. Looks like we don't currently have any questions. If you have a question, please put it into the question box on the right side of your screen, and we'll read it out loud and have Taylor answer. We do have actually now one question. if you've had GA4 set up for a year or more already, is backup still needed?
Ideally, yes. I would say I would think that you would still want to have a backup. Um, GA Universal has been around for so long, so many people are comfortable with it, that even if you have GA4 up and running, there may be things in there that you can't get, or you may want to look back 2 years. As I mentioned, I wouldn't go beyond 2 years, but if you do want to go back, say 13, 14 months, you would want to have G universal data. I think it's still good to have, and then say in a year or 6 months, if you don't use that data, then you can safely remove the data and not store it anymore. But I would definitely still suggest backing up at least the basic standard metrics of users, page views, and things like that.
Great, thank you. One question I have, in your last example, you mentioned third-party personalization tools. I was wondering if you could maybe explain a little bit more about how those work, or maybe if you know the average cost of a third-party personalization tool, just to kind of give a better idea of what that could look like.
Yeah, so the cost really ranges a lot. There are some that are relatively cheaper in the couple hundred a month, um, which is technically on the cheaper side. Others are a lot more expensive, and then others, as I mentioned, like CMS platforms, it's just integrated right into your CMS platform. So if you do happen to be on a CMS platform, which is a content management system, um, if you happen to be on one that allows for personal experiences, that may come with an extra added cost depending on the platform, or it may be included in your CMS already. And so there are tools like Optimizely. Um, Optimize is also another one, and then as I mentioned, CMS systems. And I believe there's also dynamic yield is another one. So there's a couple of different ones out there. And so basically what it does is you can use either you can put the code directly in your site or do it via tag management system such as Google Tag Manager or Telium. And you can inject that code into your site. And then basically from that personalization platform, you can now start tailoring your experiences. And so some can be as easy as, hey, here's a screenshot of your site. Show us what you want to do with it. Drag and drop things, modify the text, and we'll do that for you. That's kind of Google Optimize. But you also have other ones where it's a lot more complicated, such as okay, here's your data. Now add some value points to these specific things. Say they visited page A and B, you put 10 points to each A and B. Now that person has 20 points, and 20 points means X. They're going to be shown this specific thing. And so it can get really complicated, or it can get really easy and say, if they're on a mobile app, show this. Or you can get really complicated and say, hey, I want to know if they went through A, B, C, and D, then show them. And so you can get complicated with it or easy with it depending on what you want, but just allows you to be able to tailor that experience.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks. That's really interesting. It's amazing how much you can do with data. That's awesome. Thanks.
Yeah,
One other question we have is just to clarify, will loss of third-party cookies apply to Google Ads?
it does. So it will apply to Google Ads, especially in things like video and display, when you're marketing your site onto other sites. And so it will affect that. And that's why we mentioned your current marketing efforts like that might not be as effective. It just might mean that you may not be able to have your ad be shown on other sites, or it may be shown on other sites, but it's not exactly specific based off of the users that have come, right? So right now you might be able to say, I'm gonna go on Farmer's Almanac or some other site and say, hey, come to get your fishing license. And you may be able to do that later, or may not, but it's sort of dependent on um, what exactly Google Analytics hands down when they do remove third-party cookies and how that really translates into your specific business cases. But mainly it's going to mean that if you are able to advertise on other websites, it's going to be a little bit more random in a sense, and it's not going to be exactly as tailored as it is today because there's going to be less data that it will be known to be able to tailor it.
Great, thank you. One other question that I have is there any new feature in GA4 or new capability that you're excited about that you couldn't do in Google Universal?
Yeah, so as the couple ones that I've mentioned, like bounce rate was really big for me. Coming from the state of Connecticut, we had a lot of people going to wanting to see the flag status page, and they want to know, is the flag half staff or full staff? If it is half staff, why, and we got a lot of people doing that. And then what would happen is they would read it, they would leave, and again, it would be seen as a bounce, but in reality, it was positive for them. They got the information that they wanted. So this new adjustment to bounce rate and having the engagement rate is something I was super excited about, and I thought really solved for a problem that I saw in GA Universal. And then one of the other ones that I didn't actually mention on here is backwards pathing. So in GA Universal, you have the behavior flow and the user flow where you can see this sort of journey from the start page or a landing page, but you can't see backwards. Or in GA4, now you can see backwards. Now you can say, okay, they completed the form. What did they do before that? So now you have this backwards journey that you can now see. And that's something that you can't do in GA Universal.
Oh, interesting. Okay, thank you. Well, I think we're actually done with questions. So I really want to thank you very much, Taylor. That was great information. And as she mentioned earlier, we will be posting a more detailed presentation on our site that has more information that Taylor was unable to get to in the allotted time. So we'll have both presentations and recording online. Thank you again, Taylor. I appreciate it. For those of you still on the webinar, please take a minute to fill out the survey that pops up as you leave. It really helps us enhance our future webinars. Thank you all very much.